Week one is rapidly approaching in fantasy football. We need to get you guys right. We need to start 1-0. None of this 0-1 stuff. None of this we hate our team stuff. No, this is your year. You're going to win it all. We've already talked about running backs that I think you should be starting, wide receivers that I think you should be starting. Last two positions are quarterback and tight end. So in this video, we are talking about 7 quarterbacks and tight ends total that I think are going to go off in week one of fantasy football. As always, if you do end up enjoying, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that hype button down below if you do have it. It helps out a ton. I think it's fun that YouTube has this new button for smaller creators like myself to get more exposure. But yeah, let's jump right into it and start with Trevor Lawrence versus the Carolina Panthers. I think this is finally going to be the year that T-Law is going to actually prove to us that he was worth the first overall pick in the NFL draft. He had a rocky 2024 season. He was injured. He missed 7 games due to a concussion. And then we know he had that season-ending AC joint injury in his shoulder. But new head coach Liam Cohen is a massive upgrade and by far the best play caller Trevor has ever had at the NFL level. We know Cohen at this point, he has a really good reputation. He was a huge part for what Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Bucks did on offense last year. Now on a roster in Jacksonville with 2 potent weapons on offense. We know what Brian Thomas Jr. is at this point, but they spent the 2nd overall pick on Travis Hunter. So T-Law, no more excuses, dude. You have plenty of weapons on offense and you have a brilliant offensive mind. This is the year. We know Lawrence has never finished better than the quarterback 12 in fantasy points per game, but I think that's going to change this year in a better offensive environment. Year 5 is when Lawrence finally breaks out, and the matchup this week against the Panthers is very favorable as they've allowed a league-high 31 points per game in 2024. I could see this game being high scoring as well. 2 offenses that I'm really high on this year in Jacksonville and Carolina. So it could be a shootout, and Trevor Lawrence is going to put a lot of points up for your fantasy team. Obviously, you're not starting T-Law over some of the mainstream guys, but if you're in a deeper league, Lawrence is a really good spot start in week 1. All right, next guy up, David Njoku was probably the happiest man on this planet when he found out that 40-year-old Joe Flacco was named the starter for the Browns because Njoku looked like a completely different tight end when Flacco was throwing him the football at the end of 2023. In 5 games together, Njoku had 30 receptions, 390 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. He was a tight end 2 in fantasy, averaging 18.2 fantasy points per game. Now, do I think Flacco is going to be the QB1 for the Browns all season long? Probably not, because they're likely going to stink, and then they want to see what they have in some of these younger quarterbacks. But we are talking about week 1 here, and I think this duo is going to have a field day against the Cincinnati Bengals, who ranked last in receptions allowed and fantasy points per game to the tight end position last season. We know the situation of this game. The Browns are going to be trailing early and often, which means they're going to have to throw a lot to keep up to try to win the game. So a lot of passes Njoku's way is likely what's going to happen. The running back room has a lot of question marks. Jerome Ford, Dylan Sampson, and we know Quinshon Judkins has not signed yet. So who knows what this backfield looks like in week 1. I expect a lot of passing from Cleveland. I expect the veteran tight end to be a smash start and could finish top 5 at the position in week 1. Moving on to our next guy, Baker Mayfield, who's coming off a monster 2024 season where he set career highs across the board, 4,500 passing yards, 44 total touchdowns. He was a quarterback 3 in fantasy, averaging 22.5 fantasy points per game. Incredible. Tampa Bay went out and said, you know what, Baker, let's get you more weapons on offense. Spent a 1st-round pick on receiver out of OSU, Emeka Ibuka. You guys are familiar with him. Most people are at this point. He's going to have a huge year, and he's going to make a big impact in week 1 with no Chris Godwin, no Jalen McMillan. Yes, Liam Cohen is gone, but I'm expecting this offense to not miss a beat. They promoted Josh Grizzard within. He was a big part of what they did last year. 2 offensive coordinator. This is going to be a really good offense. Yet again, top 10 offensive line. Baker should cook in week 1 against a poor Atlanta defense that allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position last season and finished bottom 5 in both sacks and pressure rate. Atlanta has a terrible defense. I think both offenses are going to put up a lot of points. So another game that looks like it could be a shootout. I think Atlanta's offense with Michael Penix Jr., Drake London, Bijan Robinson is going to score a lot. Baker and company is going to have to keep up. If you drafted Baker, he's in for another big year and another strong week 1 performance. On to our next guy, Green Bay Packers tight end Tucker Kraft. A lot of people are fading Kraft in fantasy this year. It's going to be a massive mistake. He's one of my breakout tight ends this year. We've been high on him all offseason. He's going to be a huge part of what Green Bay does through the air this year because there's a lot of question marks at the wide receiver position. We don't really know, is Jaden Reed going to play? Christian Watson's out. I'm expecting Green Bay to throw a lot more this year after Love was banged up last season. That's kind of why they went more run heavy. But even in what was a run heavy attack in Green Bay last year, it didn't matter. Kraft still set career highs in targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns. He was 7th in yards per route run among tight ends, 12th in receiving yards per game, and he was the tight end 10 in total fantasy points. This dude is special. He's a freak of nature. He's hard to bring down after the catch. You could call him a mini George Kittle. He's not even really a mini George Kittle because he's like the exact same size. He might even be a little bit bigger than Kittle. So yeah, when you put a really athletic tight end in a really good offense with an elite quarterback that has questionable weapons around him, yeah, he's going to go off even in a tougher matchup against the Lions in week 1. This is another game. Shootout potential, 2 division rivals. Kraft is going to be the focal point of this offense, of this passing attack. I really like Kraft. Again, drop your start sits down below. We'll work through it. We'll get the right guy in your roster so you can start 1-0 this week. There's nothing better than starting 1-0. Moving on to our next guy, Drake May, who performed well under really bad conditions his rookie year with little to no weapons in the passing game. He had Demario Douglas and Hunter Henry, along with a horrible offensive line that ranked 31st in pass block win rate, 32nd in run blocking win rate. I mean, all the cards were stacked against him, and he still balled out in limited fashion and should thrive in a new system. We know Josh McDaniels comes back as offensive coordinator. I think a huge leap is in store for May because he's a lot more help on offense. They upgraded their offensive weapons, Stephon Diggs, Kyle Williams, Travion Henderson. They rebuilt this offensive line that features 4th overall pick in this year's draft, Will Campbell, who's an absolute unit. And in 9 games last year where Drake played at least 90% of the snaps, he was a quarterback 11 in fantasy, averaging 18.7 fantasy points per game. He's going to go crazy this year. He's also a quarterback that has a solid floor because of his rushing ability. He had 421 rushing yards last year in 13 games, along with 2 touchdowns. He averaged 36.8 rushing yards per game across 9 games. So really good quarterback on a much better offense that also runs the football. I think Drake will easily be a top 12 quarterback in week 1 against the Las Vegas Raiders. Not a good defense, who ranked bottom half last season in both yards per pass attempt and fantasy points per game allowed to quarterbacks. So yeah, really like May a lot in week 1. All right, moving on to our next guy, Travis Kelce. Personally, I'm not very high on Kelce, who's soon to be 36 years old in fantasy this season. But here's what I'll say. With Rashee Rice out the first 6 games, I think Kelce is going to have a significant role in this offense. We know he still has that strong rapport, strong connection with Patrick Mahomes. If you remember last year, Kelce got off to a horrible start when Rashee Rice was healthy. Those first 3 games, Kelce's total stat line through the first 3 games last year, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 69 yards, 0 touchdowns, 15 total fantasy points through 3 games. The biggest issue for Kelce is that Rice is just the better player at this point, and they both tend to operate in the same area of the field. But with Rashee out, I think Kelce is going to be very usable for fantasy. Remember, this is still a player, Travis we're talking about, that finished with 97 receptions last year. He was a tight end 5 in total fantasy points. I think he has a strong overall season. But talking about week 1, Friday night in Brazil, I think it could be another high-scoring affair against the Chargers, a team that Travis tends to dominate every time they match up his entire career. I feel like Kelce just always goes off against the Chargers. Would not surprise me at all if that's what happened in week 1. If he has 7+ receptions, over 80 yards and a score, would not be shocked. I think he is going to have a big game and find the end zone. And on to our last guy, Bryce Young, who was actually a beast to close out last season. Over his final 3 games, he had 612 yards, 10 total touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 111.6 quarterback rating, and from weeks 12 to 18, Young ranked 8th in completion percentage over expected, 5th in deep throw rate, and 12th in highly accurate throw rate. This is just a really good quarterback who had a tough start to his NFL career, but he's proving to us why he was the first overall pick a couple years ago. And he has a really smart head coach in Dave Canales, smart play caller. The guy simply knows how to develop quarterbacks, so that's promising for Young. I'm expecting Bryce to take a massive leap in year 3. The 8th overall pick, wide receiver Ted McMillan, is a huge add and is going to be monumental for Young's overall success because now he has this reliable, big frame receiver where he can throw it up to, where he can count on to make big plays on third down, to move the sticks, to get into the red zone. He didn't really have that last year. You know who he had? 33 or 34-year-old Adam Thielen, who did look great. But now he has a massive upgrade at the wide receiver position in McMillan. And I think he's going to start strong in week 1 against the Jaguars, who this defense gave up the 5th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks last season. And we just talked about it with Trevor Lawrence. I think these two offenses are going to be a lot better this year. I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair because it's two ascending offenses, in my opinion, with not very good defenses. So, yeah. I really like Bryce Young. Obviously, you're only starting Young if you're in a deeper league or a super flex, but I really like his overall outlook for not only week 1, but for the rest of the year. That's all I have for you guys today. Those are my 7 quarterbacks and tight ends who I think go off in week 1 of fantasy football. I appreciate you guys getting this far. If you can please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Again, hit that hype button if you do see it. Really appreciate it. Leave a comment down below. Start, sit, question. I'm answering every single one of them. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.